I would like to share the true and whole story of the Joshi history and how important this thing is, and you have better understanding of the whole product.
Ohayou gozaimasu, konnichiwa, konbanwa, for whenever you're listening to the Joshi Pod, your weekly podcast about the world of Japanese women's wrestling, Joshi Wrestling. I'm your host, Eric Howard, coming to you from beautiful San Diego, California. I hope all of you guys had a wonderful week. I know I did. First off, I want to thank JPQ for having me on his podcast, No Particular Angle, this week. We went into a really deep dive into Stardom. We took a look at all the factions to see where we think they're headed. He really puts on a great show. You guys should all subscribe. Again, No Particular Angle. Let me slow down and say that. Again, JPQ does such a wonderful job. Give it a listen. If you want your Stardom chat, that's the place to go. Also, as this podcast gets more established, I'm getting more wrestlers saying yes to interviews. Woohoo! I'm getting ignored a lot less, which is nice. I'm used to being ignored, but it's nice to be ignored less. We have some real fun ones coming up, and I'd be real disappointed if you missed any, so please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Like last week's podcast with the ever so eloquent Mike Quackenbush was a lot of fun. He's really a Joshi fan like you and I. He put his money where his mouth is when trying to bring Joshi talent to the United States. Again, please go back and listen to it if you haven't had a chance to. Mike's a great guy and really loves Joshi wrestling like us. On the show this week, we do have our 3-count headlines of the week, including the list of talent from Tokyo Joshi Pro heading to the US for WrestleMania weekend and who I think got snubbed, if that's the right word. Our show of the week this week is Stardom's Stacked 9th Anniversary Show. We look ahead to shows this week in Japan as well, including Kagetsu's last Stardom match. We also look ahead to see where performers are performing outside of Japan, including more talent being added to that show in Madrid. And in our big main event interview from Tokyo, we have part 1 of my interview with Japan's premier wrestling historian and journalist, Fumi Saito. I've wanted to talk to Fumi for such a long time. I'm really thankful for this podcast. Has allowed me to do it. I mean, these conversations I'm having I'd love to have, just in general, but this podcast has opened some doors for me to have some real fun conversations. Fumi and I discussed the birth of Joshi wrestling, and we get about to 1980 or so. Fumi really takes us on a history lesson. You're going to want to stick around and listen to it. It's nice to know where what we watch now came from, and he gives me some information I never even knew about. And Fumi's such a great guy, and he loves wrestling and loves sharing his love for wrestling with people and tries to educate. So stick around to the show and give him a listen. Without further delay, let's get to the biggest headlines of the week that are brought to you by Quiet Wyatt Designs. If you need a logo, t-shirt, wrestling gear, Snapchat filter, or anything else, please reach out to Nolan and his team at Quiet Wyatt Designs. Search for them on Facebook, QUIET one word, Designs. You can also find them on Redbubble. You could have also found them on the Jericho Cruise, where Nolan and Bianca got engaged. Congratulations, you two. You two are a great couple. Wish you both the very best, but again, support Nolan and Bianca and the entire team at Quiet Wyatt Designs. Again, go find them on Facebook, QUIETWYATT Designs. Headline number 1. You're simply the best. You're better than all the rest. Man, I cannot sing. No karaoke for me in Japan. Sari was named the 2019 Weekly Pro Wrestling Joshi Wrestler of the Year. Very deserved. Maya Yukihi was second. Chihiro Hashimoto was third. Mayu Iwatani was fourth. Hana Kimura was fifth, which was nice to see. And Risa Hoshiki was sixth. Sari is a very talented young woman, and she'll be facing Mayu Iwatani really soon in Stardom. We'll get to that a little bit later. But she, very deserving. There's the rumors of her coming to the States have not died down. Looks like she's going to be headed here in February, and much deserved. Headline number 2. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stardom. Happy birthday to you. On January 23rd, 2011, Stardom held their first show ever. It was a sellout at Shinkiba First Ring. Some of the names on the first show were Yokobito, Yoshiko, Nanai Takahashi, and Yuzuki Aikawa. On the undercard, there was a match between two promising rookies. Arisa Hoshiki defeated Mayu Iwatani in 7 minutes and 4 seconds. They've come a long way. Congratulations to Stardom, to Rossi, and the entire team, including the people that have stuck around the whole time. Headline number 3. Whoa, WrestleMania. I sang 3 headlines this week. That's pretty bad. Save the hate tweets. If you're going to do it, just send me a DM so it's not public for everybody. If you really hate my singing, I'd prefer a DM versus publicly shaming me. Thank you. Tokyo Joshi Pros announced their talent for the WrestleMania weekend show. The big names, the Yuka Sakazakis, the Maki Itos, the Shoko Nakajimas, Miyu Yamashitas, the ones you expected. Hyper Miss Sal's going, which I'm very happy to as well. Natsumi Maki's happy she's going. Yuki Aino. Yuki Kamafuku's coming over as well. Some international talent, Su Young, Thunder Rosa, and Priscilla Kelly will also be on the card. There were a couple of snubs, I thought. I think Palm Harajuku has come a long way and I think deserved a spot over here in the U.S. And the one I really think is the biggest snub was Yuna Manase. I think she's one of the better women there in the company and one of the backbones of the company. So I really think that she should have came over to the U.S. The women tried to hold back on their disappointment on their social media accounts, but you could tell a couple of them were pretty disappointed, including Yuna. So let's hopefully they have this one's a big success and they have another one next year, and Palm and Yuna come over to the States next year. Our show of the week this week is Stardom's 9th anniversary show at Kurikan Hall. Stardom is on fire right now. They drew over 1,600 fans at Kurikan. They are just packing it in there at Kurikan Hall, opening up more seats and more areas. They are on fire. The opener, Azumi defeated Starlight Kid and Zoe Sky. Azumi pinned Zoe with the Azumi Sushi. In the second match, Natsuko Tora, Saki Kashima, and Natsu defeated the Sayas, Kamatani and Aida, and Itsuku Hoshino. Saki pinned Aida. Love the heel Saki. Gonna root for Saki even more, just to support my boy JPQ, who loves him some Saki as well. In the next match, Tam Nakano defeated Kagetsu with a Twilight Dream. The two hugged afterwards. Again, this is part of Kagetsu's big retirement ceremony, or big retirement tour, I'm sorry. The next match, we saw a title change. B. Priestley and Jamie Hayter defeated Jungle Kiona and Konami to win the Goddess of Stardom Tag Team Championships. B. pinned Konami with a Queen's Landing. Only Haley Hatred and Alpha Female are the only other two gaijin to hold those belts, and they didn't hold them together. So it's a real big accomplishment for B and Jamie to be the first gaijin tag team ever to hold those belts. The next match was Julia, Maika, and the mystery partner, which ended up being Shuri Kondo. They've become the Donna del Mundo, the Women of the World. That's their faction name. They defeated Death Yamasan, Layla Hirsch, and Hana Kimura. It was a wild brawl. Julia pinned Layla after a tombstone piledriver. Julia said they wanted the Artist of Stardom titles, which they'll get their chance on February 8th at Kurikan Hall. I love me some Shuri Kondo. She's got that legit background, the big MMA UFC background, so it's really cool to see her there. It'd be nice to see her focus. I talked about this on a previous episode, but to focus on wrestling. She's still doing other shows as well, but it'd be nice to see her become a regular at Stardom. In the two big main events, the first one, Arisa Hoshiki used the Brazilian kick to defeat Utami Hayashishida, and she retained the Wonder of Stardom title. We got a little sloppy at times. I don't know if the blood off of Utami, or who knows, maybe she had a concussion. I don't know. But it was pretty early on in the match that Utami got cut open after having her head slammed into the mat on the outside. Good match. Arisa is crazy with her kicks, and it was a really good match. And Arisa, again, retained the Wonder of Stardom title. And in the main event on the show, the World of Stardom champion Mayu Iwatani defeated Momo Watanabe with a 2-stage dragon suplex to retain. Momo started crying after the match after another loss, and B. Priestley came out to comfort her and instead turned on Queen's Quest and joined Oedo Tai. She hit Momo with a B trigger. She then challenged Arisa for the Wonder of Stardom title, which will take place on that stacked February 8th show at Kurikan Hall. Speaking of the February 8th show, after the B turn, a video played where Sari challenged Mayu Iwatani to a match. Again, that will be on that same super duper stacked February 8th show, and I have a friend who has a spare ticket to that show on February 8th. So if you are in Japan and need a ticket to that show, they're becoming scarce, guys. Reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with the young man that has that spare ticket. Don't pass up a chance to see Mayu and Sari if you are in the area. Go check that Stardom show out.
Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Steve. I'm the host of The Last Podcast You'd Want. Do you like movies? Well, that's what we talk about. I bring a guest on, maybe more than one, and we talk about movies they like, movies they don't like, movies from their childhood, movies that give them nightmares. Just some of the few topics that we talk about on The Last Podcast You'd Want. So if you like movies, you could find us on Apple Podcast, you could find us on Google Podcast, you could find us on most major podcast outlets. Tip the veal, try the staff, check out the show.
The shows this week in Japan on tonight, the 24th. Seedling has a Kurikan Hall show where Arisa Nakajima defends her title against Yoshiko. And on the undercard, Miyuki Takase, Nanae Takahashi, and Ryo Mizunami face Tsusaka Fujimoto, Hiroyo Matsumoto, and Shuri, who just debuted in Stardom. Also on the 24th, 2AW is at Saitama, the Ice Ribbon Dojo. Ayame Sasamura and Suzu Suzuki are facing Rina Shinagaki and Tsukushi. It's easy for me to say. On the 25th, Gato Movies are back at Ichikaya. Go back, guys, and watch or look at the social media this week. Find somebody who loves you like Emmy loves Queen. It's so cool to see her go see shows, Queen shows, and just how excited she is. She's like a little kid at Christmas when she gets her Queen shows or Queen merchandise. It's pretty fun to see. Also the 25th, Ice Ribbons in Saitama, and also the 25th, Tokyo Joshi Pros in Osaka with Miyu Yamashita versus Natsumi Maki. The 26th, Stardom's in Osaka, and that's Kagetsu's last Stardom match. Well, she'll team with Mai Iwatani to face Momo Watanabe and Jungle Kiona. That should be pretty special. Also on that show, Arisa Hoshiki and Sayaida face Julia and Maika. Utami Hayashishida faces Jamie Hayter. On the 26th, Marvelous is in Shikiba First Ring. Ice Ribbons in Aichi. Teihonma is defending her Triangle Championship. Tsukasa Fujimoto and Tsukushi are defending their tag team championships against Dallas and La Horachita from CMLL, which is a pretty fun match to see. Dallas is a really strong woman. I saw her last year when I was in Tokyo when she faced or when she was on a Tokyo Joshi Pro show. Also on that card, Ram Kaichao and Rina Yamashita, two of my absolute favorites, are teaming up. And also on the card, Shuri Kondo, who's everywhere it seems like, and Yappy is on the show. If you haven't heard, Yappy is on the Joshi podcast this week, and she has a real fun interview. Give that podcast a listen to as well. Rounding out this week in Japan on the 26th, Wave has two shows in Osaka, and Wrestle One is in Saitama with Rika Saiki on the show. She's getting back from her injury. Let's see where women are performing outside of Japan. Current Tokyo Joshi Pro International Princess Champion Thunder Rosa will be on Fight TV tonight, vying for the NWA Women's Championship at the NWA Hard Times pay-per-view. She's really become a standout performer for the NWA, so check her out and let's root her on to win the title. She can be Thunder 2 belts. Stardom Session Moth Martina will be appearing at Ring of Honor's Free Enterprise show in Baltimore on Sunday, February 9th. Semi-rare occasion for Martina to be in the U.S. If you're in the area, go check her out. And also remind Martina on social media that Eric would love to have Martina on the show. Martina, I have a show that comes out on Valentine's Day. Will you be my Valentine? Please. Thank you. Ice Ribbons Akane Fujita will be in the United States on February 28th to April 3rd. Please contact Kikataru at kikataru.booking@gmail.com. She's traveling from Las Vegas while in the U.S. Let's get her booked on shows. Tokyo Joshi Pro's Mina Shirakawa will be appearing in Madrid for RCW Pro Wrestling's Japan weekend on February 15th and 16th. It's an event that celebrates Japanese culture. Yu has already been announced for the show as well. Nightshade from Eve Wrestling, who performed in Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling last year, will be there, along with Faith Hayden, who's toured with Marvelous. For more information on the event, please visit japanweekend.com/Madrid.
Hey there, this is Jungle Boy, and you are listening to the Joshi Pod.
Once again, guys, I'd like to thank you all for downloading and listening to this episode of the Joshi Pod. If you'd like to follow the show on Twitter, you can follow it at the Joshi Pod. I want to, again, thank you all for downloading. I sincerely humbled by the responses I've gotten, so thank you guys so much. Stay tuned for the interview, part 1 with Fumi Saito. We will talk to you guys next week. Arigatou gozaimasu!
He's one of Japan's leading journalists, historians, co-host of the Pacific Rim podcast with Jim Valley, who thankfully I had on my first episode. It's now nice to complete the tag team and have Fumi Saito on our show. Welcome to the show, Fumi.
Hello from Tokyo.
And I'm from San Diego, so it's a little bit different Pacific, but a little further south this, but we're still the Pacific.
Yeah, that's nice.
Again, thank you for joining the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's late there, early here.
Yeah, let's enjoy our show.
Thank you. All right. So the reason I want to bring Fumi on, and when I had Jim on, let me say this: we both spoke very highly of Fumi. That it's such a nice person. It's nice to have such a resource like Fumi, who knows so much about all wrestling. We're going to talk about Joshi wrestling today, but knows about all wrestling and speaks English very well. So he's quite the resource to have, and I'm very thankful for him to be on the show and being open to sharing his information.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to talk about the start of Joshi wrestling. It started in late 40s, Fumi. How did it come about?
Right. Late 40s, or this is a few theories to it, because we can trace back to actually the origin of female wrestling was some of the anthropologists, not just wrestling journalists or wrestling history, but we had history of female sumo wrestling in Japan. Female sumo wrestling, completely separate from our traditional sumo wrestling. There were things called female sumo wrestling, traced back to 1700s.
Well, that's pretty amazing. I mean, Japan seems to be a pretty traditional country where men do certain things, women do certain things. The same thing happened. It was in America as well. But what through your studying history, I mean, what was it like to hear about women doing female, quote unquote men things? Yeah.
Yeah, trace back to 1700 or so. But it's more of like barnstorming. That the bandwagon and then the circus comes to your town. And it was one of those things. Male sumo wrestling is more prestigious, really total, more barnstorming, oriented, like your circus thing. And very few books are written about it. It's just like it was never covered by newspaper or things, and it's like people study your PhD studies or something. But there were such thing as female sumo wrestling. You trace back to 1700s all the way to like 1920s, and that's, I would call it, one of the origin of female wrestling in Japan. Yeah.
So do you think it was, since it was a barnstorming sideshow kind of thing, do you think it was real, or do you think it was a performance?
It's hard to tell. Just like your 1800s, 19th century barnstorming in Europe and America too. It's like a circus oriented, somewhat a freak show. Who can lift up the big weights, or who can beat this guy, or, you could never tell if it was a work or complete shoot or both or mix. Blend, I call it. Yeah.
Do you know if the women were overweight women, or was it like kind of like a looking at the sexy girl kind of show kind of thing? Do you have
not the sexy girl, more of a fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we move on from the sumo, the early days of women's sumo, to traditional.
Such thing, yeah.
So the traditional, was it around the same time as the men started, the post World War II era, where Joshi wrestling started in Japan as well?
Yeah. Actually, earlier than men's wrestling. See,
Oh wow.
Ricky Dawson's wrestling won't start until 1951. And there was a more like a vaudeville show in Tokyo, 1948, just 3 years after the war, you know. And there was it's well documented show, 1948, 1949, right in Tokyo. It was more of a, I'd say freak show oriented, but it was one of the very much root of female pro wrestling in Japan because that Sadako Igari, the very first professional female wrestler in Japan, debuted with this group. You know.
So how did they find out about wrestling in general? I mean, how would it have gotten to Japan?
Oh, there was a couple attempts, way before Ricky Dozan, that there's a few people who ran wrestling here, way before Ricky Dozan. It was like as early as late 1800s, like when, 1860s and 1900s, 1910s and 1920s. There was a couple attempts that to bring in American style professional wrestling. Sorakichi Matsuda went to America, and his friend, Shokichi Hamada brought back wrestling in Japan and ran the show here, conjunction with sumo wrestling. So there were like forgotten history about wrestling. So not everything started with Ricky Dozan here.
Mm.
Or you can say 1920s, that there was a judo against wrestling thing, in Japan. And that was traditional, pro wrestling. And so it is like there's more than one root of professional wrestling in this country. Yeah.
Was kayfabe a thing back then too, where it's like where they had the shoot sumo wrestling along with the worked professional wrestling?
Well, the concept is like there was not just like the whole concept of I'm pretty sure that the concept of kayfabe was there too, but all those things were after we learned a lot about it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure back in Frank Gotch, George Hackenschmidt days, even before Ed Strangler Lewis, there was kayfabe, and also when wrestling was still gambling, you bet the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would think gambling, because it's gambling, it's shoot. Actually, it would be a work because it was gambling, to beat the odd.
Yeah, they know.
You know what I'm saying?
They can outsmart the gamblers. Yep.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So, and also there's quite a few times that the Japanese sumo wrestlers traveled to Europe and had their show, and the very important ones are like I'm talking about way before Ricky Dozan, that there was people like gosh, this is like a slipping out of my mind. So Sorakichi Matsuda, right?
Yes.
Very first Japanese professional wrestler who went to America and had a match against people like William Muldoon,
Mm-hmm.
and that's professional wrestling. And also in 1920s and 1930s, there was a Matty Matsuda who was champion in Texas, welterweight, professional wrestling champion, Japanese person. And there was Ed Santel, from California, who came to Japan and challenged judo. That was 1920s. All those things happened way before Ricky Dozan, But traditional histories, usually they want to start with Ricky Dozan. So there were quite a few attempts to bring American style wrestling before Ricky Dozan. So that's the one part.
So what happened with Ricky Dozan to make what was special about him, or what was it? The right place, right time,
Well,
right
he had
person?
he had the big capital, and also it was that was like Rikidozan's pro wrestling company was mega sports, mega event right from the day one. You had that, television starting, um, American GHQ brought the general headquarters, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a war between the U.S. and Japan, and U.S. occupants. And the very first show Rikidozan worked was 1951. That GHQ brought the whole crew of wrestlers and had the show at the Sumo Palace, and that was the show Rikidozan and Kokichi Endo participated after 2 weeks of training by Bobby Brands. That was the very beginning. And also, it was backed up by the television company that was just starting, and the beginning of television was beginning of wrestling, and all these things worked, and that was the birth of after the war, the modern period, all these, like a new culture thing, But in smaller scales, there were a few things in wrestling that that the American promoter or American wrestler, Japanese wrestler tried to start wrestling here before Rikidozan. Anyhow, there was this 1948 women's professional wrestling show right in Tokyo by Chopin, Pan Ikari and Chopin Ikari. These brothers were both billions, more of a musical and dance, and it was the Sadako Igari's wrestling, matches were part of that, like your entertainment,
Like
But
like one of those TV shows. The word's escaping me.
But there was no TV though. There was no TV then. 1948.
It was like it was like a show with all different kinds of acts on it. It wasn't just wrestling. It was music. It was dancing. It was it was everything.
Yeah. So it was like a female, like a fight, and more, but somewhat erotic too,
So
yeah.
So we got to my understanding, Mildred Burke came over at some point too, right, to start training.
1954. 1954. I was gonna get to it.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
let me get out of your way.
Event. Yeah, because not just one event were leading up to the history. See, a lot of things happens in the beginning. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Even in American, Frank Gotch himself just didn't start it. There was people before Frank Gotch. There was people before William Muldoon. The Colonel. These names slipping out of my mind, but there was catch as can wrestling or American collar and quarter, collar and elbow people, and eventually became professional wrestling. Right? It all came from Europe, but it was like that. But it was planted by bigger capital in 1954. Mildred, just like you said, the very first major American style professional wrestling was Brock Park. Yes, 6 wrestlers: Mildred Burke, Great May Yang, Ruth Port Kelly, Gloria Bertini, and 2 more wrestlers, Beverly Anderson and Rita Martinez. They had show November of 1954 at the Sumo Palace. 3 days in a row, they sold out. But the audience was for American troops, though, basically, still. And now it was open for public, but not too many Japanese audience were aware of it, And it was mainly for the troops, American troops in Japan. And that was the show, like I said, that Sadako Igari, the original women's wrestler in Japan, she had matched, she joined this tour.
And that's where she got some training from Mildred and some of the women?
She already debuted, previous years, but quite a few Japanese female were trained by this troupe and became wrestler after that. And now, following year, 1955, there was already a Japanese wrestling, female wrestling group.
So, how was in society, I guess, in the 50s, how was it? How do you think it was looked at for women to be in such a
Wrestling.
wrestling? Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was like a more of like a they wanted to. There were a group of people and promoters, post-war promoters that who wanted to run shows around the country. See, the one thing we have to point out that is that in Japan, Joshi Pro Wrestling history, Joshi Wrestling was never a part of men's organization. That's a very important part. See, Ricky Dawson did not really acknowledge it, you know. Ricky Dawson and Mildred Bark met, of course, in 1954, and had picture taken together. But Ricky Dawson did not run women's wrestling, and actually, Ricky Dawson didn't like it that much, And there was a group of people and promoters who were involved in wrestling wanted to do, women's wrestling in this country. And as early as 1955, there was already not the All Japan Pro Women's Wrestling that we know of, but there was a group called All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling in 1955. And all through during 1950s, there was like 6 or 7 women's company already running shows in Japan. Not All Japan Women we know, but there was a group called All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling, Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling, Tokyo Universal Wrestling, International Women's Wrestling, Hiroshima Wrestling Club, and such. And there's like 6 or 7 groups all through 50s. There were a women's group running all over the country in 50s without television.
So in the 50s, was it men going to the shows? Was it women going to the shows? Was it a mix, you think?
I have no idea. It was more like, shows coming to your town, I'm sure it was mixed crowd, male, female, old and young. And
because it makes me wonder,
yeah.
Was it a show to go see pretty girls do wrestling, or was it a show to go see women do athletic things? You know what I mean?
Much like sumo, you just go there and expect to see fight, I think.
Okay.
And also, the reason we don't have much, resources these women's company were running, we know it, and then they were still, even to me, we're still trying to find more evidence, but women's wrestling company in 50s into 60s, they were never covered by news, sports pages or newspapers and such. And they were not on television, but they were running shows.
Is that because of like the male run media didn't cover them, you think?
And also, it was probably never one simple reason,
Yeah.
There was no star power like Ricky Dawson, that just an epitome of professional wrestling and huge superstar. Everybody knows. There was no such star like that in women's wrestling. But they were like 1950, version of barnstorming. They were running show all over the country, smaller town, everything. And so women's wrestling always existed, completely separate from men's professional wrestling organization.
So this might be hard to answer, but was it like you say there was all these promotions around? Was it like a group from the start? They split off and to go into different groups, or was it just
right?
Okay.
Or maybe all the independent promoters or the strong promoters or stronger promoters, they're running shows. There's like, I'm sure they are trying to outdraw each other, or regional companies or Tokyo-oriented companies or more of a barnstorming kind of companies, and find posters and something, they were doing loudspeaker to advertise their shows, they were going, all over the country, all around 50s. I'd say it was more, it's hard to say, but more Yakuza, mafia-oriented shows, probably.
Gotcha.
They're running shows all over the country, just like your music show, pop music shows. your, play, country samurai act show. Just it was like a more pre-modern style thing. They don't have much record for it. But there are, a lot of female wrestlers we don't know about, but they were running shows all over the country in 50s. Let's put it that way.
So where in history can you start finding like solid information?
Records and there was, like I said, 1954 Mildred Bark show. They started in Sumo Palace in Tokyo. They toured Osaka. They toured Kobe. They toured all over country with GHQ. And following year, 1955, there was a record that 5 or 6 women's company already started running shows all over the country. Then we skip, fast forward about 10 years, 1967, Japan Joshi Pro Wrestling Association really started with 10 women's wrestlers and 4 midgets. There was a record, 1967. And they split the group in 1968. 1968, we have All Japan Women's Wrestling. Matsunaga Brothers.
The one we all know about.
Yeah, right. 1968. And there was a television, not the regular television, but that 1968, Japan Joshi Pro Wrestling Association had Fabulous Moolah tour. Very same year, All Japan Women started. And they brought in people like, from Mildred Bark School of Wrestling, Mary Jane, the Lucille Debris, the International Girls Tag, and there's a group called AGWA, American Girls Wrestling Association. And there were clearly 2 strong female wrestling groups in 1968, and both had television, but wasn't regular weekly television. They did that, TV special like a couple times a year. And December of 1968, Fuji Television, Channel 8, started airing All Japan Women. That's that's an earliest record of All Japan Pro Wrestling. So 1968.
How well was it received on TV? I'm guessing it was pretty popular.
68, 69, 1970. I watched the weekly, like every week show, but when it was on, I always watched it.
So Moolah has gotten there's a lot of good, a lot of bad said about Moolah
for the first time in 68.
Yeah, but a lot of good and a lot of bad has been said about Moolah. You mean, was she there to do business? Was she there to put herself over? Do you kind of have an idea of how it was?
I think she was here to plant the seed. Not as an active wrestler and put herself over. Of course, she'll put herself over, but the main purpose was to plant the seed. Like a long, real long-term, term relationship with new market, Japan, women's company, completely separate from men's group. They're running shows, all year long, 150 to 200 shows a year. There's a business, and Fabulous Moolah was here to start sending, American groups, or like a business, and even after a couple years after that, 69, 1970, 71, Moolah switched side, and she started coming over for All Japan Women's too,
So who were some of the early stars of the All Japan Women's promotion?
Oh, Aiko Kyo, Kyoko Okada, Aiko Kyo, quite a few, but it's really hard to say who was a star like who was your Luthez, or Dory Funk Jr., or, what I'm saying? It's really hard. The champion I remember was always Chio Obata,
You remember watching her on TV?
Yeah.
What stood out to you about her?
Singles world champion. She had a match against Masked Killer and Masked Mary, Mary Bagnans, or some names, Yeah.
What was the skill level like for the women at that point?
Wow. Wow. That's hard because I was kid watching it, but it was more like a airplane spin and body slam to your pinfall,
Kind of the Moolah style?
I think so. I think so. And not wrestlers, Japanese wrestlers, Chio Bata, Ai Kyoko, all these, women wrestlers were not exactly young and pretty either, They were like wrestlers,
They look like wrestlers. Yeah, like like wrestlers, yeah. So
Yeah.
So like we get to the 60s, we're starting heading into the 70s now.
Yeah.
What's the transition from the 60s to 70s like as far as they're on TV now and how are they perceived?
Channel Fuji, Channel 8, network television, Fuji TV started really running regularly, and there was a breakthrough superstar in Mak Fumiake. That era was the very, very beginning of so commercialized, start singing in the ring and appearing in all kinds of different TV shows. And she was like a big pop idol, Mak Fumiake.
So was she like mainstream, everywhere?
Mainstream, very mainstream. She was on television. She was in movie. She was, she cut an album, and actually, Mak Fumiake came out of this TV show called Star Tanjo. It's like a Star Search, Star Search type television. She was a finalist of this, find the new, pop idol kind of TV show. She was a finalist, but she didn't make the final. Then she turned into wrestler, age of 16, and Mak Fumiake, 1972. Very, very big, huge superstar. That made female wrestling like really mainstream. This was before Beauty Pair.
So was it men going to the shows because she's a pretty girl, or is it men and women both going to shows?
Men and women both going shows, yeah. And also this was, All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling as we know it, and that was a company who were running 300 shows a year, all over the country. And they were, by having Mak Fumiake, they became really, really popular on television. She was the first one to be singing in the ring, and she was, Fumiake was the first one who did the movies, who appeared in those, pop singers, show, all kinds. Really, really, really popular. But what's that?
Did you buy her record?
Not really, but I always watched her, and she was really pretty, 6 feet tall, 16-year-old girl. But thing was, she only wrestled for 3 years. Then she turned into an actor, and she's been an actor ever since. She's still around. Yeah, so she left wrestling after 3 years.
So was the boom of TV made more women want to start getting into wrestling, you think?
Because of Mak Fumiake, yes. See,
Okay.
Her influence has been kind of overlooked in American study of Joshi wrestling, Usually, English written Japanese women's history start from like a Beauty Pair era,
Mm-hmm. That's why I want you on here for me to set the record straight.
If there was no Mak Fumiake, there would never be Beauty Pair. Same age, Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda. Right after Mak Fumiake left, Channel 8, and the women's company needed to make a new star, and they was already there. Just as tall, just as talented, Maki Ueda and Jackie Sato, the pair, tag team, And those two cut an album. They were in the movies. They were on the television. It was just mainstream superstar after Mak Fumiake. But the first breakthrough was always Mak Fumiake.
So, I mean, still to this day, we see really young girls starting to train in Japan. That's always been how it is, where really young girls start training at 13, 14, 15 years old?
Yeah. Mak Fumiake was only 16. and she was like 18 when she retired, but she became mainstream actor, so that's good for her. But she only wrestled 3 years. But the beauty pair era, there was better wrestlers, and it was more of a forerunner of your Crush Girls era, right? Beauty pair, Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda, their rivals, Queen Angels, Aoyama, Lucy Kayama. Golden pair, Nancy Kumi, Victoria Fujimi. Black pair, Yumi Ikeshita, Shinobu Aso. All these great tag team came out, and I guess the more tag team and pair were there for more women oriented, like a typical All Japan style, I guess. More high flying, lucha libre influences, and
where do you think that came from?
I guess most of the wrestlers was somewhat trained by Mexican wrestlers who came over here. They always had Mexican luchadoras in Japan, along with Japanese wrestlers. And for some reason, yeah.
Were the Japanese women were they traveling abroad yet to go to the States or to Mexico, or had that not really become a thing yet?
102 at a time, yes, but there was just, not as much as your 70s and 80s and 90s. It's just, I guess the channel Fuji, Fuji Television, I'm sorry, Channel 8 always ran women's wrestling. And the production became bigger, and it was not a, your smoke-filled old arena thing. It was like a more lighting and, the bigger speakers, nicer, shinier costume, singing and dancing, and then wrestling, and it was like a formation of your really Japanese style Joshi pro wrestling in this early 70s into the mid 70s. It's like that was that like a foundation of what we know as All Japan women's style. And after Beauty Pair, you have your Jackie Sat, your Devo Masami and your Jaguar Yokota, all those girls were starting then.
So those were the influences for the Manami Toyotas, the Aja Kongs. Those women were the ones they grew up watching.
I think so. Well, the Aja was more like a Crush Girls fan,
So we got the beauty pair. They're mainstream. They're drawing big houses at like Budokan, correct? They have big shows,
right? And also there was like the movies were made, about them, and they had hit single songs, and so they brought in like non-wrestling fans into the building, which was good. And they were still running 300 shows a year all over the country. So it was your traditional Joshi style, See, All Japan always ran many, many shows, They never flew. They never took bullet trains. They're always on the bus and went all over the country,
Must have been a pretty rough life to go from town to town by bus, all over the country.
Yeah, 300 nights a year. But that's what All Japan women did, Yeah.
Who were the trainers creating the next women? Who was running the dojos at that point? Do you have any idea?
Probably retired Japanese wrestlers. Retired Japanese wrestlers like your, the ones who married to Matsunaga's brothers. Actually it's mom and dad family, run business. The operation got bigger, but it was all run by Matsunaga family, 4 brothers and their wives and kids and all the cousins. I would say it was more like your, what's the Tennessee family? Welch's and Follows.
Yep.
Yeah, that kind of operation. Yeah.
Mom and pop. Yeah. Mom, keep it all in the family.
Yeah, yeah, and all the 20 other cousins too, all running the show, setting up the concession, setting up the ring, setting up the chair. They even brought their own tent, and they ran show in middle of nowhere with their own ring and own, set of chair, and with their tent, an open space.
So was it kind of carny like how it was here in America, where like the marks and all that kind of stuff? Was that attitude over in Japan as well?
Like what?
About calling the fans the marks, and and trying to fool them and get whatever they can out of the fans, and pull as much money out of the fans as they can.
But not everything is being translated, equally. There's different traditions. We had different kind of circus history in our country, and there was always. And there's like we always had different kind of brainstormings and acting and all these things. So that Japanese tradition were there. I'm not so sure about this. Really emphasize on this, Marx and Carney and kayfabe and all these. That's a very American way to look at it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. That's why I was curious about the difference.
Not everything would be translated equally. It was a show. It was like they had old tradition and old settings and everything with network channel, and there were always a lot of girls, a lot of wrestlers. And at one point they were running 2 sets of shows too. 2 buses in 2 different towns and 2 different shows. They're running it like that at one point in 70s.
So when they're doing mainstream, I'm curious about this. When they're doing mainstream interviews, are they doing him in quote unquote character, or are they doing it as themselves?
Ooh, that's also tradition. I mean, like a very modern way to look at it. I believe Buddy Rogers was Buddy Rogers 24/7. Don't you think?
Yeah.
So I'll look at Gorgeous George. I'm sure it was 24/7 Gorgeous George. So these wrestlers becoming star, they had to be in character 24/7 too. But then again, look at Aja Kong. She's 24/7 Aja Kong. I mean, even to this day,
Yeah.
Antonio Inoki, 78-year-old Antonio Inoki. To this day, he is Antonio Inoki 24/7. So it's really, I don't know if they are in on character or after character or anything like that. So as long as they're in the public eyes, wrestlers are wrestlers.
And I mean, again, I don't know if you know for sure, but were they as secretive about the business as well back in the 70s? Protecting the business?
Of course. But then again, baby faces and heels are always on the same bus, though. And a lot of people knew about it, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, and even if they're in blood feuds, they're still traveling on the same bus, and people know when people know they're on the same bus.
The fans who come to building and get close to wrestlers know that much. Yeah. But just like today's wrestling, if you have 100 wrestling fans, you have 100 different definitions to what you know and what you don't know and what you like and what you don't like. There's always different version of it. Even after you watch the same show, what you get out of is always different.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So
I think yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I wanted to know.
Okay. Do you know when tapes from Japan started traveling outside of Japan? Like people could start seeing the wrestling outside of Japan, the Joshi wrestling?
Oh, that's exactly the same time as your Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid era. See, what do you remember? What year you or your parents bought a very first VCR?
I had a VCR probably in 1982.
Okay, around that time then, yeah. But I didn't buy my first VCR till like 83 or beginning of 84 or something. And that was a VHS era, and half the people still had the beta or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But around that time, see, all through 70s, even like 78, 79, 1980, there were weekly women's professional wrestling show on television, but not everybody had VCR yet.
Mm-hmm.
Just as soon as you have VCR, you start taping women's wrestling, of course. Crush Girls, the Jaguar Yokota, the Devil Masami, the Dump Matsumoto, all that era. You were taping Antonio Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling, Fujinami against Choshu, Tiger Mask against Dynamite Kid, and you taping Jumbo Tsuruta and the Funks or something, right? So that was around the same time. People are starts trading VHS tapes between states and Japan. So around the same time, though.
So, but let me ask you about the beauty pair. Like, so their you saw them wrestle. So their era of wrestling versus the Crush Gals wrestling, how does it compare to each other?
Beauty pair era and the Crush Girls era, you mean?
Yeah, how, like, in the ring, how or just the whole show, how would it compare to how would you compare the two, since we see more of the Crush Gals tapes than we do the beauty pair tapes?
I think beauty pair was very, very talented for what it was in that period of time. And actually, both Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda, the beauty pair, they were like 4 or 5 inches taller than Crush Girls, They're both 6 feet girls, Very tall, Jackie Sato was a track runner and high jumper and high school elite athlete, And I don't know Maki Ueda's background, but they were both really tall, Not as sophisticated, if that's what you're asking, because it's so 70s.
Mm-hmm.
They were wearing your like Elvis like jumpsuit, and you have your bell bottoms, and a different kind of funny looking microphone, and dances were not as sophisticated, but basically what Beauty Pair was doing in the ring and Crush Girls were doing in the ring, the singing and dancing, wrestling, they're pretty much the same pattern, no? But the Crush Girls had more things to learn from, in the early 80s. They watched more videos. And they were like, I think Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda's era, they did not really do a lot of men's moves, These were really separate. And also the lockup, because of Mexican influence, it was right arm first, like not the left first. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Mexican influence. So you have your right arm first. That's how you lock up. And your headlock sometimes the right hand side. And airplane spin, double arm suplex was always like a big finishing move. By Crush Girls era, double arm suplex, you kick out a counter two, right? They were doing spinning heel kicks, the German suplex. That they fair to compare these two. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a different era.
Oh yeah, we evolve. We learn and evolve. Correct.
Yeah. So Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda were every bit as talented as other, the more modern girls, I think. Because I remember watching it as my junior high. I was watching it every week. They were good, I think, for the time.
Like a junior high Fumi, were you watching anything and everything you could on TV? Any wrestling you could watch?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, ever since I was a little kid, yes.
Me too.
And there was not just All Japan, Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling and Anthony Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling. There was another company called IWE, International Wrestling Enterprise, the third company, and also there was a program at the American television coming from Madison Square Garden. So I was able to watch Pedro Morales against Blackjack Mulligan or something. And there was a program on Sunday afternoon called Young Pro Wrestle. They only show undercard for 30 minutes. And I watched everything.
Now, when you got a VCR, did you start recording everything?
Yeah, pretty much. By then, I wanted to trade, and it's like I didn't get everything because there was WWF didn't have TV in Japan. NWA had territories, so how many NWA territories do you want to watch, And in mid 80s, there was a Channel 12 show called World Pro Wrestling Show that they showed tapes from NWA Crockett, World Class Dallas, NWA Florida, a little bit of AWA, a little bit of WWF. So we were able to watch some, but like not weekly, programming or anything like that. And yeah, not until WrestleMania era that you can regularly watch all the big shows.
Now, I'm going a little off topic here. When did you come to America to live?
Summer of '79.
So
yeah, summer of 1979. I was an exchange student.
Living was it Minnesota?
Minnesota. Yeah, yeah.
So
the first, the week after I got there, I went to Minneapolis Auditorium and saw Nick Bockwinkel against Greg Gagne.
Not a bad way to start, huh?
Yeah, and then Adrian Adonis debuting in the first match. I mean, new guy new in territory. Jesse Ventura was just becoming local, favorite too. Paul Ellering, Steve Olsonowski, all these people.
So you were right in
Ray
the AWA.
Stevens was still there. Yeah, Minnesota. And the funny thing is, though, if you lived in Minnesota in 1979, you wouldn't know that there were other wrestling in the world.
Yeah, I grew up here in San Diego, and my earliest life memories is going to the shows here in San Diego, watching the Guerreros and
Okay.
That's where I grew up at. So in Andre and Piper and those guys, and that was my entire wrestling world. Besides, I got the after magazines, at the newsstands and stuff.
Right, there were other wrestling exists, but they're never on video.
No,
and
no,
then you
no.
just said Andre the Giant, but the Andre the Giant only comes in once or twice a year, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was always
Other than
special.
that, you have John Tallis or somebody.
Yeah, all those guys. Yeah, Fujinami came in quite a few times as well.
Sure. Because he traveled a lot. And also he was, besides Anthony Inoki, Fujinami was very much international star because he won the junior heavyweight title in Madison Square Garden, and he defended title in Olympic Auditorium. Then he had, he goes back to Japan and have, tour or two. Then between tours, he goes back to America and he has title defense in Olympic. He was like an international traveling superstar.
Yeah, it was always a big deal when he came in, and he was always better than all the guys that were here already.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but those were if TV Asahi's, New Japan Pro Wrestling show covers that, overseas shows, we can get to watch it. But not every match he had in America,
Yeah.
And I never watched it. So that was something that I had to read on the magazine, And Japanese wrestling fans have always been more reading oriented,
All right, so Fumi, let's stop right here. Let's stop right at the start of the Crush Gals. And then
Sure.
Hopefully I can have you on another time, and we can go from the 80s on and go from there. But I think this is a great introduction to the history of
80s. We cannot get to 90s, and there was a dark age.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the dark age. That actually interests me quite a bit.
Yeah, because after Crash Girls, all female audience, crazy, popular, super popular. Right when Chigusa Nagayo and Lioness Asuka retired for the first time, all those girls disappeared. I mean, female fans disappeared from the building. Then there was a dark age until Bo Nakano era.
We'll get to that. Yeah, let's tease with that because I love Bull Nakano. She's my forever my crush. She's my crush.
Oh gosh, she is so good. So I can talk about Bo Nakano all night long. But I'm not sure how clear I was with this. Very very beginning of this Japanese wrestling. But what I want American audience, our listeners, to know is that Japanese Joshi wrestling had their own evolution in history. The Joshi wrestling was never part of men's organization, always completely separate from men's group, always all female groups, different development, different history, all different evolution. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And that's what's so unique about Japanese Joshi wrestling. and I get really excited about it. We came all the way to very early part of 1981, like a beginning of VCR era, But let's do it again.
I appreciate that. And again, I just want to say how important it is I hope you guys, listeners, understand how important it is to have somebody like Fumi out there who speaks English, which is, it's terrible that I should speak Japanese, but I don't. But thankfully, Fumi speaks English and can share with the world.
I love English. To share this. Not like, I don't brag about myself, but I would like to share the true and whole story of this, the Joshi history and how important this thing is, and you have better understanding of the whole product. You know what I'm saying?
And we all appreciate it.
All
right, Fumi. So let's hit pause there real quick, and we'll come back with the next episode with the start with the Crush Gals.
Let's do that.